You are listening to the Speak Podcast.
The podcast featuring talks from Speak, a public speaking platform for people with ideas and stories.
Produced by Launchpad 516 Studios. Welcome to the Speak Podcast, produced by Launchpad 516 Studios. New episodes available every week on all your favorite podcast platforms.
Speak is a public speaking platform for people with ideas and stories. Each Speak Talk features 3 key moments: the moment of truth, the moment of transformation, and the moment of impact.
We host pop-up events all over the world, and now we are bringing our talks to your device. Our speakers are stepping onto the stage and into the spotlight, and now onto this podcast.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the Speak Podcast. I'm your host for today, George Andriopoulos, the architect and one of the co-leaders here at Speak. Today's micro theme is something that we can all relate to, and it's all about family. The micro theme is called The Thing About Family, where we dive into 3 incredible talks from published speakers from all over the world whose talks pertain to family matters. So let's just dive right in. Our first talk comes from our Speak Heritage event, which took place in July of 2023 at Governors in Levittown, New York. That event was produced by our producer, Dana Lopez, who is also a published speaker. Weaving together the unexpected, the serendipitous, and the painful, Christina DiPaolo tells the story of her family of strivers. Although her maternal and paternal families were quite different, they were alike in foundational ways. This multi-generational tale explores what it means to strive for better in life and how this family trait transformed everyone it touched. Here's Christina DiPaolo with The Strivers.
If the world hadn't been plunged into war in 1939, I would not exist. My parents probably would have married people within their local orbits. Dad would have married a French-Canadian woman in southern Maine, and Mom would have married an Italian-American man in northern New Jersey. No, it took immense global conflict to shift their paths just enough to meet on a blind date in 1947 while my father attended college in New Jersey on the GI Bill. They came from very different circumstances. He grew up poor, she comfortably middle class. He was the eldest of 10, she the youngest of 3. His family was not known for being demonstrative, and she was the baby of a doting father. And yet these families shared 3 backbone-sturdy consistencies. They were practicing Catholics, they were populated with strong women, and they believed in striving for better in life. This striving, this quest for advancement, however you want to individually define it, this is what overlays the pride that I feel in my family heritage. My mother's father emigrated to the U.S. from Italy as a young man. He was quiet, elegant, striving to create a life in this country distinct from the one that he left behind. He and my grandmother, a first-generation Sicilian, were proud of their Italian heritage, but they weren't confined by it. Pop was a successful barber in New Jersey, and he built a home for his growing family in a non-Italian part of town. It was this beautiful 3-bedroom Dutch colonial with a large front porch, enclosed garage, and expansive patio in the back. I remember that home vividly from my childhood because it was a symbol of work and advancement. It was a quest for family advancement that led to a notable shouting match between my father and his father just a few weeks before my parents met each other. See, before the Second World War ended, Dad had an opportunity to enroll in naval officer training, so he left his post in the South Pacific and he started taking classes at Princeton University. When the war ended, though, all the servicemen who had previously matriculated came back and they restarted their college careers, so Dad had to wait for a spot to open up. He waited 2 years for that spot to appear, again in New Jersey. But by this time, he wasn't sure if he wanted to go. He had a fiancée in Maine, and he thought he would just live his life there. Well, thank God my grandfather, a man who had spent his life as a machinist in a textile mill, told my dad otherwise. One of my uncles told me that they fought the night before Dad was to board a train to come to New Jersey, but my grandfather prevailed. You know, my family's predilection for striving for better in life leads me to a story of my parents, a story of transformation for them and for me that I'm sure would have sounded impossible to them when they first met each other. I'm the youngest of three by a number of years. My siblings were teenagers when I came along. Before I was born, my parents struggled financially, raising their children and trying to save for a house. My mom had an opportunity to work at a local pharmaceutical company, so she started to do that to save money to buy a home for the family. She loved that job. She really loved it. But she gave it up when she became pregnant with me. This was the 1960s, after all. After I was born, though, her bosses contacted her and asked, would she come back? My mom was really conflicted about this. I mean, work had given her something new, a different kind of purpose, but she had a baby at home who needed to be cared for. Do you remember a few moments ago when I said that the second backbone sturdy consistency in my family heritage is strong women? My mother's mother, Nani, was one such woman. Nani had an independent nature and a steady disregard for gender roles that just got in her way. So when she found out that my mom had a chance to go back to work full-time, well, Nani was all over it. She offered to take care of me during the day so that Mom could go back to work, and the childcare issue was now off the table. But my mom didn't tell my dad at first that she was going back to work. I mean, she knew she'd have to at some point, right? Certainly before they filed their taxes. Once my dad found out, he was supportive of her. I mean, it afforded them a life that was simply unavailable to them on one income. And my mother blossomed in her job. Now, mind you, this was an atypical arrangement for a married suburban mother in the 60s and the 70s, and Mom often worried that I was being shortchanged in the deal, that I would be negatively impacted by her career. But I never once felt lacking. In fact, the pride that I felt in having a mother who was her own person, working with interesting people and having a life outside the home was enormous. It was the life that I wanted to have when I grew up. And yet, as my mother grew from the reality of her job, from this outward manifestation of striving for better, my father would one day suffer from the absence of his. When Dad turned 64, he was forced into retirement, a transition that he had dreaded for years and was unprepared for when it arrived. This man, who had found purpose and meaning come to him through extraordinary circumstances, a college education, marriage to a woman unlike any he knew back home, and a life in the New York metropolitan area, this man now faced an immovable wall. I was a young woman when all of this was happening to him, and I started to see a darker side to striving for better in life. Dad never fully recovered from that forced retirement, and he succumbed to lung cancer 2 years later. And that threw me into a tailspin. I started to question everything. I mean, what does it mean to strive? What does it mean to pursue what you love doing only if that thing could be taken away from you? What was my extended family shared legacy of striving for better in life really about? For a long time, I didn't know, especially after my father's death. I knew what the people in my family had been doing for generations, striving for themselves or their children. But I felt like I was only going through the motions. I was doing what had always been done, but I really didn't understand why. It was only when I started to look at these past generations, not through their family roles or as quasi-mythic figures, but as people, did I begin to understand what striving for better in life meant. To me, it meant, and it continues to mean, finding joy in the accomplishment, in putting some kind of crazy goal out there for yourself and meeting it. And it's knowing you have the skill and the ability and the freedom within yourself to embody your chosen purpose. You know, whether it was my Italian grandparents honoring their heritage but living in a neighborhood of their own choosing, or my French-Canadian grandfather practically tying my father to a train seat so that he could have a life unavailable to him at home, or my mother, who expanded her sense of self through outside employment. The strivings that make up my family history were unexpected, maybe even a bit revolutionary. But the people who came before me lived them knowingly, consciously, and with clear intent. It is because of them that I developed my work ethic and my desire to be engaged in the world. It's because of them that I am standing here before you tonight. They lived their lives wanting to squeeze more out of their time on earth, and in doing so, they created a gorgeous history and a heritage that I am blessed to call mine. Thank you.
That was Christina DiPaolo with her Speak Talk, The Strivers. What an incredible talk. What a poised speaker who was such a professional on stage. I had the pleasure of sitting in the audience as an audience member, which doesn't happen too often to Fred, Jason, and I, but we sat in the audience and enjoyed Christina's talk. It was just so smooth. It was so nuanced. It was so powerful for such a simple talk. So thank you, Christina, for all that you brought to our stage. Our next talk comes from across the pond at our first ever international event, Speak Transformation, which took place on the 5th of October in 2023 in Belfast, Northern Ireland at the Belfast Empire Music Hall. Mairead Loughran-Ryan's talk delves into two perspectives: her personal experience of caring for someone with addiction and the public health view of addiction. She addresses how addiction is predominantly a problem within Northern Ireland and why it is important that we address the reasons addiction develops and the harms it leads to, such as premature death. She believes this is an important topic to address to stop preventable deaths, and Mairead specifically tells an incredible story about a family member in this talk. Without further ado, here's Mairead Loughran-Ryan with Dying to be Saved.
I was born on the brink of the 90s, so I am going to claim the 90s baby status, much to controversy. But after the year before, the 90s when I was born, the Good Friday Agreement was signed, and that was a time of huge transformation within Northern Ireland, from a place where many people lost family members to starting the combined effort to the path for peace. It was a time where two polar opposite ideologies finally came together to form a new society where they could both coexist and live in peace. My personal experience of transformation came from living with someone who suffered from alcohol addiction, and that person was my Uncle Barney. He lived with me, my mum and my brother from I was 10 years old. And Barney is an example of how the imprints of trauma can go on to manifest. And although many people here may assume, oh, she wasn't born then, what does she know? She's a Zoomer. She's one of them people from Generation Z. She's one of those dilemmas we have in this modern age. What I can tell you is through my experience of helping look after my uncle, but also in my profession of mental health nursing, I have come to see how the manifestation of those who once had invisible scars has now come to the forefront of our society. So whilst Barney lived with us and his alcohol addiction began to spiral out of control, within the public health arena, alcohol addiction was gaining a lot of momentum and increasing on a global, local and national stage. So globally, alcohol addiction still remains one of the global burden of diseases and accounts for up to 3 million deaths per year, still worldwide. And nationally, deaths had increased by 18.6% from 2019 to 2022. And right here in Northern Ireland, it still remains the drug of choice. And I know we're in a bar, but the point of it is when things get out of moderation, and it now has increased by 56% in terms of alcohol-related deaths in the past 10 years. So as I said, looking after and living with Barney was the key to my personal transformation. And one thing I would like to point out is Barney wasn't someone who you would look at and all these stereotypes we create of what an alcoholic would look like. In fact, he didn't even drink alcohol, and into his late 20s often tried to get the taste of alcohol away with Coca-Cola, as my mummy always said. He was always slagged by his friends because he couldn't quite manage to get the drink down. But that all quickly changed as Barney went on to develop schizophrenia and, like I said, alcohol addiction. So today and tonight, I'm going to be sharing with you a short piece I wrote, hypothetically to him, in a bid to try and understand and also put across my experience as both not just a mental health nurse, but the real and raw experience you have when you care for someone with alcohol addiction. So I'm going to be sharing that with you now. Addiction appears to me like a slow suicide. You sit there stationed to the right chair of the kitchen table, which I came to be told was yours when I was through out of it. Barney always had this chair in our house, and everybody who came in knew that this was his chair. In one hand, you had the cheapest packet of cigarettes, and in the other, you had a glass of a clear substance that I always thought resembled water. But I now know this substance to be the despicable vodka, often known as the devil's drink, and I now know why it's gained that reputation. Barney, there were times that you began to drown in the alcohol, and I remember one particular time whilst I was lying on the sofa, you had fallen off the sofa and smashed onto the wooden planks of the floor, and the force of you hitting the floor had wakened me from my sleep, and I turned around to see you with your mouth laid gaped, your eyes vacant, the blue glint everyone always said you had was now absent, and your pupils had shrunk. And in that moment, I had thought the unthinkable. I thought that you were dead. But then as you began to move, it became evident to me that you were alive, but the alcohol had overcome the blood-brain barrier to the point you were no longer in control. And those times became more often as time went by, and the havoc the poison had caused became more evident. You began to waddle in short distances, requiring a rollator, and t-shirts that once sat neatly round your solid figure now drown your feeble and twig-like structure. My heart always sank when I saw it again. We would often find you surrounded in pools of crimson, and your head was indented by the obstruction of many objects through the many falls you had. Every time, and your eyes would continue to glisten at the vodka. Yes, I know you tried your best, but we all lay on roller coasters of emotion. And for everyone here who may have experience of alcohol addiction or looking after someone, which I would say is a lot of people for where we live, you know, when people relapse, you feel like you're at the bottom of that mountain again, and there's no way that you're getting back up when they start to drink again. But then when they have recovery, it's like an unfulfilled wish, and you're counting down the days of when it's going to relapse again. So with Barney developing this addiction, I had decided to enter mental health nursing at 18, and I'm now 24. And when I entered mental health nursing, I went into it to try and save my uncle. I had a savior complex that I could save him if I'd done this profession. But that soon didn't become the reality, as noted in 2022 in our statistics, up to 300 people die from alcohol addiction. And Barney was one of those statistics, unfortunately. And it made me angry, and the more I learned about addiction, my tongue was no longer Russ, because I looked and I thought, why is this allowed to happen? Yes, people say the addict has to take some form of ownership, but we need to be doing something to help these people. People are traumatized from the troubles, but they weren't given any intervention to stop the manifestation of their trauma. And our hearts were shattered when we lost Barney, because Barney was a quick-witted, loved handyman known in every street corner. And he was often referred to as the Robin Hood in his prime, much to controversy back then, but I suppose he had the right idea of trying to help those in need. And when we lost Barney, I decided that mental health nursing, yes, I went into it to help him, but is this what I want to do? Because I did feel like a failure, because I hadn't saved him. I hadn't done what I set out to do. And I was asking myself the what ifs, and I began to lose my passion a bit with it. And then I realized, if I take a back seat, I'm not going to be helping these other people who are in the early stages of entering the same vicious cycle Barney found himself in. And basically, I continued down my path of mental health nursing, and I want to be part of the fight to get addiction recognised here, and finally let people see what the real and raw emotions are of those who care for them. Thank you.
That was Mairead Loughran Ryan with Dying to Be Saved. What a powerful talk. And I was so honored to hear this honest depiction of the story of Mairead's uncle in this talk, and to hear that from her personally. Going to Northern Ireland for a Speak pop-up event was such an incredible experience. And Mairead was so honest with us, talking to us about the culture in Northern Ireland, how it differs from the rest of the world. And we just learned so much and really fell in love with the culture while we were over there. So thank you, Mairead. Thank you to the people of Northern Ireland for accepting us with open arms. And we can't wait to come back for another event. Our final talk for today comes from our Speak Seasons pop-up event, which took place at Launchpad 516 Speak HQ on December 14th, 2023. Angela Wadley shares her story of growing up chasing perfection, only to learn that it was an impossible and unnecessary feat. Through her personal journey, she shares the struggles she faced, the heartbreak of shattered expectations, and the valuable lessons she learned along the way. This Speak Talk serves as a reminder to embrace courage, cultivate resilience, and find true authenticity in a world obsessed with self-imposed perfection. Here's Angela Wadley with Breaking the Chains of Perfection, Resilience, Courage, and Triumph.
I've never shared this publicly. I was raised by a single mom. She worked really hard to raise us alone. We had a small family. There were just 3 of us. And I never really thought about it until around holiday time. She was a teacher during the week, and on the weekends, she would do all kinds of things. Real estate, teacher trainings. She was always busy. And in addition to that, she took us to Bible class 3 times a week. So it was a lot. And one summer, when I was a little girl, she decided she needed a break. She really needed a break. So she decided to take us to my grandmother's house. Off we went. My grandmother lived in the country, and there was a lot of land around the house and lots of area to play outside. And there was a huge garden, and on the side of the garden was like a huge spread of bushes, and you could pick blackberries. And I knew that if I picked enough blackberries, even though they stained my fingers, I would get a fresh pie, and my granddad would make fresh homemade vanilla ice cream to put on top. So I had a lot of incentive to pick a lot of blackberries. It was amazing. And one thing that I really, really loved was he would take us to his mom's house, his mom's farm, and he would call names like he's calling dogs, but dogs wouldn't come running. Cows would come running, and they'd come running from the woods. It was like something magical. So we'd get to like rub them and hug them and play with them, just like dogs, which I loved. And it sounds like a country fairy tale, right? But it was not. There was a dark side to this. Most people love to go to their grandmother's house, right? You get spoiled, you get to get away with things and break rules and all kinds of things you can't get away with at home, right? Not my grandmother. She was mean, at least to me. I had no idea I would spend that summer defending myself and keeping myself strong so she would not break me. I knew in my heart that what she was doing was wrong. And I was determined to stay as strong as possible. And in addition to that, she would do all kinds of things just to annoy me. I remember one day, it was really nice outside, so I was playing kind of farther away from the house. I didn't really like to be in the house. And I hear her call my name. So I'm like, oh God. So I start making my way back to the house, and I can tell that my brother was playing right in front of the house. Her seat was right by the front door. He was playing right in front of the house. So I knew it wasn't urgent, right, because he was still playing. So I pass him on my way in, and I go up to her, and I'm like, yes? She says, hand me my water. So I look down, and next to the arm of her chair on the table was a glass of water. So I'm thinking, there's no way she would call somebody in to get that water. So it had to be like some other water, kitchen or something, right? So I say, sure, where is it? She smirks and says, right there. So I'm so tired of her picking on me, right? So I know there are going to be consequences, but I have to say it. I have to ask because it makes no sense to me, even as a kid. I say, why did you call me all the way in to get this water when my brother was right there? She says, because boys are meant to play and girls are meant to work. I had seen her treat my brother so much better than me. She was so nice to him all the time. So I had seen the difference in treatment. But to hear her make that statement, I was shocked. And once I got over the shock, I felt hopeless because there was nothing I could do. I was going to keep suffering just because I'm a girl. And my mom would call, hi, how's everything going? It's okay. How are you doing? I'm fine. I knew that she needed that break from us. And me trying to be the perfect daughter didn't want to tell her because I didn't want to upset her and ruin her peace that summer. So I had no one to talk to. I couldn't tell my brother because he was younger and he was having a great time. Like, she was amazing to him. So I started writing in my little diary. It was red and white, and it had a little brass lock on the side. It wasn't a big lock, but it made me feel that my words were safe. And that's the way I got through things there. So I come in the house one day, on my way to my room. That's the safest place for me. And I hear her recite words and phrases in a sneering tone. And at first I'm confused. And then I feel dread because I recognize what she's saying. Those are the words from my diary. So I try to play it off. What are you talking about? What are you saying? She takes my diary from behind her back. She stands there, flips through it, recites my private thoughts out loud, teases me about what I've written, and fusses at me about the parts she doesn't like. I'm so angry, so frustrated, and I felt just violated. And yet, when my mom would call, "How are you doing?" "I'm fine." So fast forward several years later, I moved far away from home, and it was holiday time. And I don't remember why I wasn't going back home, but once my best friend found out I was going to be alone, she's like, nope, you're coming with me to my family's house for a holiday. And it's going to be a huge gathering. And so that sounded amazing to me because my family was small. So I'm so excited. I get dressed and look very festive, but not over the top because I knew I would need to blend in. The only person I would know is my best friend. So we get there, and I go way out of my comfort zone. I'm like, I just wanted everybody to know I appreciated them having me there. So I laughed and talked to people who were laughing and talking, and people who just wanted to be listened to. I just listened to them. And even though I didn't know how to cook yet, I went in the kitchen and was like, can I help you with anything? Can I set the table? Just anything. I was trying to be the perfect guest. So we sit down, it's a huge table, it's decorated, and everybody says grace. And it starts off with the carving of the turkey. And we have to offer up our plates so they can put the turkey on. And I'm a vegetarian, so I politely say, no, thank you. Well, all hell breaks loose. It was like a record scratch on a movie or TV. And an older lady says, why don't you want any turkey? I say simply, because I'm a vegetarian. That had to be the worst thing I could say to this woman because she proceeds to just rip me to shreds. And she wraps it up in a nice holiday bow of, well, this dinner is for family anyway. I was shocked. I wasn't hurt because I had my grandmother be mean to me before, right? So an older woman being mean to me, it doesn't hurt. I was shocked. So all those people around the table that I had just been like laughing and chatting with, they're all staring at me, watching me get chewed to shreds. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I was not going to eat that turkey just because she was upset. And it made me think. I had spent all this effort going out of my comfort zone, trying to be the perfect guest, when all she cared about was that I ate turkey. So all that effort was a waste. So over the years, I realized that trying to be perfect and trying to wait for the perfect time for things had caused a lot of frustration, wasted time, wasted effort, and disappointment. So I had to learn to give myself grace. I had to learn to stand strong in my values, to defend myself and stand up for myself, to reach for my goals no matter what, and just try to be the best me that I could be, aiming for excellence and not perfection. And because of those lessons, I never found the perfect time to write my book. But I did it. It won some awards, and I got to see it on a billboard in Times Square. I never found the perfect time to launch my business, but I did it. So now I get to empower other people to overcome limiting beliefs, stop the self-sabotage, and live happier lives. And I never found the perfect time to be a speaker, but here I am. And yeah, I did tell my mom what happened that summer, and she said exactly what I knew she would say. She said, I wish you had told me the truth. You never had to be perfect or try to be perfect. All you needed to do was be yourself. If only I had told her the truth that summer. But hey, nobody's perfect. Thank you.
That was Angela Wadley with her Speak Talk, Breaking the Chains of Perfection, Resilience, Courage, and Triumph. Angela closed the show at our Speak Seasons event, and she was just so powerful. And we were so happy to have her at such a special event. Speak Seasons, as we've mentioned before, was actually a small pop-up event that took place during our first annual holiday party for Speak, and it was the inaugural Speak at the Studio show. So Angela took place in what we hope to be a historic moment at our headquarters, and we thank her for taking our stage. That does it for this episode. Join us next week and every week as we bring you 3 more incredible Speak Talks from 3 more incredible speakers every single week. We'll see you next time, guys.
The Speak Podcast is brought to you by Launchpad 516 Studios. Executive produced by Fred P. Banning,
Jason Martin,
and George Andriopoulos. Our theme song, Champions Day, is by Lupus Nocti. Incidental music, Melting Places, is by Andres Cantu. Music and sound effects licensed through Epidemic Sound. The Speak Podcast is hosted with Podbean.
Make sure to subscribe to this feed wherever podcasts are available and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts while you're at it. Follow Speak at Speak_event on Twitter and at Speak Event on all other social media platforms.
Visit our website, speakevent.com, for upcoming events, channel partner, sponsorship, and Speak at Work opportunities.
and follow all the great podcasts produced by Launchpad 516 Studios.